Norway and Dacia and the British Isle will be vexed by the united brothers. The Roman chief sprung from Gallic blood, and his forces hurled back into the forests. In the trembling lines of Century 6, Quatrain 7, Nostradamus casts a dense and cryptic shadow over Europe, a moment of convergence where distant lands, ancestral legacies and opposing forces are bound by a shared fate. The Quatrain begins with a blunt declaration. Norway and Dacia and the British Isle will be vexed by the united brothers. These are not metaphorical lands or mythic placeholders. They are real regions named plainly, and they appear not in sequence or hierarchy, but side by side, like a chord struck all at once. They do not respond, they do not resist, and they are not differentiated in tone or treatment. The poet does not tell us how they are vexed, nor why these three, but he does tell us that it happens together. This simultaneity is the point. Three nations, separated by geography and culture, receive the same blow from the same hand at the same time. Structurally, this creates a triad of affliction. These lands are not aligned by will, cause, or alliance. They are not co-actors. What unites them is passive, the experience of being struck. Logically, this is pure coexistence, a synchronous, reciprocal state among elements that reflect each other without directly influencing each other. There is no implication that one nation's vexation leads to another's. The text holds them in parallel. They are made equal by the pressure that finds them, not by anything they do. Their relationship is not causal, but geometric. They form a plane, not a chain. The lesson is that shared disruption can form patterns that look like alliances, but are nothing of the kind. We are often taught to look for coordination when multiple places fall into similar states of unrest. But here the poet warns against that assumption. Sometimes it is not coordination, but coincidence within a system of external pressure, a system we may not see. Nostradamus shows us what it looks like when disparate regions become equally vulnerable to a single unifying force without knowing each other, without communicating, without even recognizing that they are in the same story. The warning is to watch not for common cause, but for simultaneous effect, because that is often the sign of a hidden influence already in motion. From the moment the nations are named as vexed, the verse begins to fall. First, there is the condition of unrest. Will be vexed by the united brothers. No resolution is given, no resistance described, only the fact of the disturbance. Then a new figure enters. The Roman chief sprung from Gallic blood, a would-be stabilizer or responder to the chaos, but he too is caught in the motion. His forces, we're told, are hurled back into the forests. No victory, no stalemate, only retreat. What begins as regional agitation becomes military defeat, and what ends as defeat becomes withdrawal into obscurity. It is not a single moment of loss, but a sequence, from pressure to failure to dispersal. This sequence reflects the logic of reinforcement. The triad is made of three distinct states: vexation, defeat, and retreat, each intensifying the one before. The pressure leads to military confrontation. Confrontation ends not in resolution, but in collapse. Collapse forces flight. The triad spirals, each link reinforcing the downward movement. There's no loop back to stability. Each element sets the stage for the next deterioration. This is not a causal chain in the sense of isolated reactions, but a self-deepening pattern where unrest begets not merely unrest, but deeper and more consequential versions of itself. It is the shape of recursive destabilization. The lesson is not just that conflict escalates. The lesson is that certain systems are built to fall this way. Once entered, the cycle closes behind you. Vexation may seem like agitation at first, but if met with force and no resolution, it leads to loss. If that loss is not transformed into recovery, it leads to withdrawal. The poet shows us how easily momentum builds on collapse, how defeat compounds, not from external blow after blow, but from internal failure to contain the spiral. Be wary of thinking that unrest is ever static. If you do not exit the pattern early, it will finish you. In the first half of the Quatrain, the source of the upheaval is named with chilling simplicity: the United Brothers. We are told they vex the nations, but the effect of their pressure extends further. It is their action, unspecified, unexamined, that sets off the larger sequence. Their movement provokes a military response. The Roman chief, whose forces are soon hurled back into the forests. We are not told of any battle nor victory, only that the chief's army is thrown into retreat. The brothers act, and by the final line, the Roman presence has vanished into the trees. Nothing interrupts this arc. This forms the triad of causality: the United Brothers, the Roman forces, and the forests. Each follows from the last. The pressure of the brothers initiates a defensive mobilization. The defense ends not in resolution, but in a forced retreat. What's notable is how clean the structure is. There's no ambiguity about what starts it. Remove the brothers, and the military is never deployed. Remove the deployment, and the forest remains untouched. This is not just sequence, it's trigger and consequence, precisely aligned. The triad lays bare a principle. In complex systems, it only takes one true instigator. The warning is about concentrated origin points, the kind of actors who don't need scale to create change. The brothers are not described as leaders of states. They are a unit, a faction, a compact will. But it is unified intent, not size, that gives them force. Nostradamus cautions us that collapse doesn't need a broad front, only a narrow, decisive one. In systems already primed with tension, it may only take a single, coherent actor to unravel the whole. Power responds to provocation, even when doing so ensures its own undoing. The danger lies in underestimating what the few can set in motion. At first glance, the poem names two very different settings. The northern lands, Norway and the British Isle, struck by the United Brothers, and the forests into which the Roman chief's forces are eventually hurled. These aren't neighbouring territories, and the Quatrain offers no direct bridge between them. But the implication is unmistakable. The unrest that erupts in one region resonates in another, much farther away. The chief's retreat may not happen in the same place where the nations are vexed, but the poet arranges them as part of the same unfolding. The blow lands in one quarter of the world, and its echo is felt deep in another. This is the triad of non-linear consequence: Norway, the British Isle, and the forests. What binds them isn't geography or simultaneity, but implication across distance. The northern nations experience direct pressure. The Roman forces fall far from that pressure's origin. Yet the poem doesn't reset between these events. It flows. The forest becomes not just a location, but the final consequence of a conflict that started somewhere else. This triad shows how events do not always unfold where they begin. It represents a sequence with a missing middle. No visible chain, just the tremor and the break. This teaches a lesson about how destabilization travels, not as a straight line, but as a pattern that jumps borders and skips intermediaries. In complex systems, especially political or military ones, disruption often appears downstream from its cause, in places that never seemed immediately threatened. The warning is clear. Do not only watch where the pressure lands, watch where the ground shifts far away. By the time the retreat begins in the forest, the disturbance that caused it may already be forgotten by those who did not trace its path. Nostradamus shows us that impact is not always local, and that the further echo may be the more catastrophic one. As the verse unfolds, the cast of participants grows. First come the united brothers, initiators of the disturbance. Then the vexed nations, Norway, Dacia, and the British Isle, who bear the immediate pressure of that aggression. Finally, the poem introduces the Roman chief, a figure not named as an original target, but drawn in nonetheless, compelled to act. He enters the turmoil not to expand it, but likely to contain it, yet by the end he shares in its consequence. He is hurled back like the rest. No one remains above the fray. Every new participant becomes entangled regardless of intention. This forms the triad of inclusive escalation: the aggressors, the afflicted, and the responder. The pattern is not linear, but absorptive. Each new element is added not as a separate strand, but as another thread in the same tightening net. The united brothers trigger the crisis. The afflicted nations magnify it simply by being numerous and vulnerable. The Roman chief, rather than resolving it, becomes caught within it. He is not outside the pattern, he is the continuation of it. This is what defines an inclusive structure. Not just many elements, but many roles folding into the same effect. The lesson is this: crises recruit. Once unrest begins, it does not remain confined to its initiators or its victims. Those who enter to help, leaders, mediators, even military powers, are not immune. Their involvement completes the structure. Nostradamus shows how conflict moves not just by spreading harm, but by drawing more actors into its logic. Be wary of assuming a neutral stance in volatile systems. Trying to contain the fire may place you inside the blaze. The more complex the disruption, the more likely it is that no one, not even the strong, will stand apart for long. In the final line of the quatrain, the forest becomes the last setting, the place where the narrative concludes, his forces hurled back into the forests. The phrase evokes more than simple retreat. It suggests disorder, dispersal, a return to wildness. But we are also told that it is the Roman chief and his forces who are driven there. They do not fall separately, they are flung as one. No distinction is made between command and obedience, strategy and execution. All are swept up together and cast into the same ending, an undifferentiated collapse. This is the triad of conjoined fate: the Roman chief, his forces, and the forest that receives them. Structurally, the forest is the place where identity collapses into outcome. It binds leader and army into a single unit of failure. The triad doesn't show a hierarchy of blame or sequence. It shows convergence. Whatever separated these figures before, rank, role, responsibility, is dissolved in the result. The forest in this triad is not just a location, but a symbol of institutional undoing. It is where formal structures are swallowed by consequence. The lesson is stark. In moments of systemic failure, the system doesn't fall in parts. It falls whole. Nostradamus is warning that collapse doesn't isolate guilt or spare position. The highest and lowest, the most visible and the most expendable, may find themselves joined in the same end. When collapse comes, it does not respect the boundaries of hierarchy. Be wary of thinking your role protects you. Whether you lead or follow, the system's direction becomes your own when it breaks. When the center gives way, it takes everyone with it. Though the Quatrain names each figure in its own moment, the implied confrontation takes on a triangular shape. The united brothers, the Roman chief, and his forces. The brothers act first, initiating pressure on the vexed nations and triggering a response. The chief, in turn, steps forward, his title and origin implying a formal role, perhaps imperial, perhaps stabilizing. But he does not act alone. He brings with him an army, his forces, who bear the brunt of what follows. The brothers' aggression leads to the chief's mobilization. The chief's mobilization brings the forces into conflict. The force's fate becomes a measure of the conflict's intensity. Each element is bound to the others, not by chain, but by mutual tension. This is the triad of harmonic interaction. Each pair influences and provokes the third. The brothers and the chief form the axis of intent. The chief and his forces form the axis of execution. The forces and the brothers form the axis of impact. No single line determines the outcome. Instead, the outcome arises from the resonance between the three, each one reacting not just to one other, but to the shifting pressure of both. This is not a linear clash, but a field of overlapping influences, where every movement alters the balance. The triad creates a living structure, a triangle whose angles keep tightening with each new action. The lesson is that conflict often takes shape, not through direct sequence, but through mutual distortion. Power does not move in straight lines. It bends and ricochets between actors whose intentions amplify, react, and escalate one another. The more tightly those actors are bound by allegiance, command, or opposition, the more volatile the system becomes. Nostradamus is describing not just a struggle, but a feedback circuit of action. The warning is to recognize when multiple forces are locked in reactive standoff. In such systems, no participant truly controls the outcome. Everyone is pulling on everyone else's blade. In a brief but revealing phrase, the poem pivots from military movement to personal origin. The Roman chief sprung from Gallic blood. This is not a casual detail. Nostradamus names the man by title, Roman, the embodiment of imperial authority, but grounds him in a different ancestral soil, Gallic, the bloodline of an older, possibly rival identity. The chief is not merely a Roman leader by office. He is a figure born of two worlds. His power is inherited and assumed, drawn from two separate streams. And in the poem's structure, he is the only character described this intimately, not for what he does, but for what he is. This is the triad of convergent identity: Roman office, Gallic blood, and the chief himself, in whom these elements are fused. This triad doesn't operate on the battlefield, it operates within a person. The structure is not about sequence or cause, but constitution. The chief stands as the intersection of history, power, and personhood. He is not wholly Roman, not wholly Gallic, and not simply a hybrid. He is a singularity produced by convergence. Each point of the triad implies the others. His role cannot be understood apart from his lineage, nor his lineage apart from the authority he holds. The man becomes a node where multiple identities meet and perhaps collide. The lesson is that leadership is rarely singular. Those in power do not act from pure allegiance or unbroken lineage. They carry with them contradictions, inheritances, and assumed roles, and the tension between these parts is often what defines them. Nostradamus here warns that composite authority is powerful, but also unstable. Such figures may unite multiple realms, but they also bear the stress of their fusion. Be wary of leaders who belong to more than one world. They may bridge histories, but they are also where those histories may unravel. The Roman chief, already introduced as sprung from Gallic blood, is not left to stand apart from the landscape. He is placed into proximity with Dacia, one of the named regions under attack. On the surface, Dacia is just another part of the vexed triad, but its historical relationship to Rome and its borderland status suggest more. Dacia is the kind of region where empires meet resistance and where identities blur. Here, a chief of mixed heritage is made to confront not just an external disturbance, but a terrain that reflects the contradictions within him. The poet doesn't need to spell this out. The placement is enough, a man of layered ancestry facing a land in upheaval. This forms the triad of combination Gallic origin, Roman authority, and the region of Dacia. Each point intensifies the others. The chief's heritage is already complex, but placed against Dacia, a zone of imperial conflict, it becomes politically charged. His role as Roman leader may demand suppression or defense of the region, but his blood may not be fully aligned with imperial will. And Dacia itself becomes more than a site of disturbance. It becomes a crucible for the unresolved tensions carried by the man sent to contain it. This triad is not about unity. It's about friction across levels, personal, institutional, and territorial. The lesson is that crises often place leaders in positions where their own unresolved contradictions are mirrored in the world they must govern. The chief doesn't just face rebellion, he faces a landscape that reflects his own internal divide. Nostradamus warns that when identity and geography overlap in tension, the stakes multiply. Where you come from may echo uncomfortably in what you are sent to control. Watch for when personal history meets contested terrain, because that is where both individual and empire may falter. The names return once more: Norway and Dacia and the British Isle. We have seen them listed as co-sufferers at the beginning of the Quatrain, but here their grouping takes on sharper meaning. These regions are not clustered because of shared language, religion, or proximity. They are grouped because they are all vexed by the United Brothers. It is not their commonality that binds them, but their common treatment. They are named together by the aggressor, drawn into a single formation by external pressure. Their alignment is not strategic or voluntary, it is circumstantial, even accidental. The brothers' aggression is the thread that sews them into one figure. This is the triad of association through external force. Norway, Dacia, and the British Isle, linked not by internal resonance, but by being targets of the same campaign. What holds them together is not shared action, nor shared culture, but simultaneous subjection. It's a triad formed from without. And that is key. These are not allies. They are co-defined by an aggressor's design. The United Brothers do not need these nations to see each other as allies in order to use them as a collective target. And in doing so, they create an unintended unity, not of cooperation, but of fate. The lesson here is that victims are often grouped into roles they did not choose, and that such groupings shape the narrative even if those within them remain disconnected. Nostradamus reminds us that external pressure creates its own logic of association. The world sees what happens to you and draws lines accordingly. So when different regions or groups begin to suffer the same treatment, even if they are unaware of each other, it may be the sign that a larger system of intent is already at work. The hand that strikes also chooses who belongs together. In the totality of the scene, there are no spectators left. The united brothers, the vexed nations, and the Roman chief have all entered the frame, and none of them exits it. The brothers initiate pressure, vexing the outer regions. The nations tremble beneath the force of their aggression. The chief, perhaps acting to restore order or defend territory, is pulled in and ultimately defeated, cast with his forces into the forests. These are not isolated acts. The Quatrain presents them as interdependent. Each figure's condition sets the stage for the next. What begins as external disturbance becomes collective breakdown. This is the triad of integration, not merely three roles, but three forces locked into a shared system. The aggressors, the afflicted, and the responder form a structure where each depends on the others to produce the outcome. The brothers do not just cause vexation, they draw in the Roman chief. The chief does not just suffer defeat, his involvement affirms the severity of the crisis. The nations are not merely victims, they form the stage across which the other forces collide. What emerges is not a set of separate events, but a single, woven disturbance. Aggression, collapse, and response feeding one another into a unified catastrophe. The lesson is that history is not made by single threads, and collapse is never as clean as a single cause. When systems unravel, it's because multiple agents, roles, and conditions have already interlocked, often without realizing it. Nostradamus offers a structural warning. When aggressors move and victims suffer and defenders engage, they often form a fabric of mutual dependency that no one actor controls. You are already part of the pattern the moment you respond to it. The weave is built before it is named, and once drawn in, you are part of the collapse, not beside it. The brilliance of this quatrain lies not only in what it describes, but in how it arranges what it describes. Through these 11 triads, some explicit, some hidden, Nostradamus does not merely forecast events. He builds a system, a structural progression of pressures, roles, and reversals. He teaches through relationships not just what happens, but how things combine, reflect, and amplify. He shows how vulnerability becomes synchrony, how disruption reinforces itself, how a small unity can fracture empires, and how even the most elevated identities are subject to collapse when entangled. He shows that geography does not protect, that origin does not exempt, and that no participant escapes the pattern once it begins to tighten. These are not metaphors, they are mechanics. Every triad is a tension, and every tension, if unchecked, closes into a system. This is Century 6, Quatrain 7, the moment where structure becomes completion. 6 is the number of form, of unstable equilibrium. 7 is where it resolves, not into piece, but into the whole. The triads begin with scattered actors, nations, brothers, a chief, and end in a total weave. 11 distinct triads, each mapping one angle of collapse, converge into one pattern of inevitability. The message is not locked in time. These structures recur. They are not predictions, they are templates. When you see distant places begin to fall in step, when roles converge and collapse dissolves command, When identity cannot hold against terrain, you are not seeing chaos. You are seeing the pattern assert itself. So the call remains. Read the signs. Trace the structures. Do not mistake timing for protection. Do not mistake distance for insulation. And above all, when the brothers unite, the forests wait.